I sat in the HR conference room, watching my boss's face turn pale as the company lawyer slid a legal document toward him. The lawyer pointed to a specific line and said calmly, "Your own words. Now, let's listen." My heart pounded as months of workplace torture were about to be exposed. Marcus had just demanded HR fire me for illegally recording meetings. But what he didn't know was that those recordings contained his own criminal threats and harassment that could destroy his career forever. 3 months earlier, I was just Cheryl Williams, a 28-year-old marketing coordinator at Henderson & Associates, a mid-size consulting firm in Denver. Life was already challenging enough, as I balanced work with caring for my disabled father, whose medical bills seemed to multiply faster than I could pay them. I needed every cent from my job, especially the overtime pay that helped cover his physical therapy sessions. That's when I first noticed something was wrong with my paychecks. I had worked 12 hours of overtime the previous week, meticulously tracking every minute because I knew how crucial that extra money was for Dad's treatments. But when I opened my pay stub, only 4 overtime hours appeared. My stomach dropped. I double-checked my timesheet, my calendar, even my phone records showing late-night work calls. The evidence was clear, but the paycheck told a different story. Marcus Thompson, my boss, had always been 2 different people. Around clients, he was charming and professional, the kind of smooth talker who could sell ice to Eskimos. But behind closed doors with employees, he transformed into something entirely different. His smile would disappear, replaced by cold eyes and a voice that could cut glass. I gathered my courage and knocked on his office door, armed with my timesheet and calculations. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his computer. "Marcus, I think there might be an error with my overtime hours this week. I worked 12 hours, but only 4 are showing on my paycheck." His fingers stopped typing. Slowly, he turned to face me, and I saw that familiar transformation happen in real time. The professional mask slipped away. "Close the door, Cheryl." My pulse quickened, but I obeyed. As soon as the door clicked shut, Marcus leaned back in his leather chair and studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I've been wondering when someone would start asking questions about overtime." His tone was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it more unsettling. "Tell me, how much do you know about how this company makes its profits?" "I'm not sure what you mean. I just want to understand why my hours don't match my paycheck." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Smart employees don't ask stupid questions, Cheryl. They trust that their bosses know what's best for the company. But those were my hours. I worked them." "Did you?" "According to my records, you worked exactly what you were paid for." He opened a file drawer and pulled out what looked like my timesheet, but the numbers had been changed. My overtime entries were crossed out and initialed with Marcus's signature. "You can't just change my timesheet. That's stealing." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Marcus's expression darkened completely. "Stealing? That's a serious accusation. You want to know about stealing? I'll tell you about stealing." He stood up and walked around his desk, stopping just close enough to make me uncomfortable. "Every month, I save this company thousands of dollars by making sure overtime costs stay reasonable. The money I save goes back into everyone's job security. Without my adjustments, we'd have to start laying people off. That doesn't make it legal." "Legal?" Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "You think you understand legal? Let me explain something about the real world, Cheryl. You're replaceable. Every single person in this office is replaceable. But you know what's not replaceable? Loyalty, trust. Employees who understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I was seeing Marcus Thompson for the first time. This wasn't about company profits or job security. This was about power and control. "I need those overtime hours. My father depends on that money for his medical care. Then I guess you better hope you can keep your job." He returned to his desk and sat down. "Because employees who cause problems tend to find themselves looking for work elsewhere. And in this industry, word travels fast about troublemakers. I left his office feeling sick to my stomach but also angry. As I walked past the cubicles of my coworkers, I started paying attention to their faces in a way I never had before. Sarah Martinez, the junior account coordinator, always looked exhausted and stressed. David Chen from the design team rarely made eye contact anymore. Amanda Foster from client services had dark circles under her eyes and jumped whenever someone spoke to her. They all looked defeated, scared. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my father, helping him with his evening medication routine. His hands shook slightly as he reached for his water glass, a side effect of his condition that broke my heart every single day. "How was work today, sweetheart?" he asked. The same question he'd been asking since I was 16 and got my first job. For the first time in years, I didn't have a simple answer. "Dad, what would you do if you knew someone at work was doing something wrong, but speaking up could cost you your job?" He studied my face with those wise eyes that had guided me through every major decision of my life. I'd remember that my daughter didn't raise me to be a coward. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us something, but doing the wrong thing costs us everything. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I opened my phone and navigated to the voice recorder app. If Marcus wanted to steal from his employees and threaten their livelihoods, then I was going to make sure every word he said was documented. The next morning, I walked into Henderson and Associates with my phone recording in my pocket, ready to catch Marcus Thompson in the act of destroying the lives of people who trusted him. For the next 3 weeks, I became a detective in my own workplace. Every conversation with Marcus was secretly recorded. Every interaction documented with dates and times. What I discovered was far worse than stolen overtime. Marcus Thompson was a predator. It started with small observations. The way he lingered too long when talking to female employees. How his voice changed when he complimented women on their appearance instead of their work. The casual touches that lasted just a moment too long to be professional. But the real revelation came during a team meeting when I watched him systematically destroy Sarah Martinez's confidence. "Sarah, these client reports are unacceptable," Marcus announced in front of the entire marketing team. "The analysis is shallow, the recommendations are generic, and frankly, I'm questioning whether you're capable of handling this level of responsibility." Sarah's face flushed red as 8 pairs of eyes turned toward her. I had seen her working on those reports until nearly midnight for 3 consecutive days, perfecting every detail. "I can revise them," she said quietly. "What specifically would you like me to change?" "Everything. Start over." "And Sarah?" Marcus's voice carried a threatening edge. "This company can't afford to carry dead weight. I hope you understand what I'm saying." After the meeting, I found Sarah crying in the bathroom. "Sarah, those reports were excellent. I reviewed them yesterday when you asked for feedback." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "It doesn't matter. Nothing I do is ever good enough for him. I've been here 2 years, and he treats me like I'm incompetent. Have you talked to HR about this?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Patricia Webb? She and Marcus are joined at the hip. Last month, I tried to file a complaint about his comments on my appearance, and she told me I was being too sensitive. Said I should be flattered that my boss notices when I make an effort with my appearance." That afternoon, I intentionally stayed late to observe Marcus's interactions when fewer people were around. What I witnessed made my blood run cold. Amanda Foster was working alone in the conference room, preparing presentation materials for a client meeting. Marcus entered without knocking and closed the door behind him. "Working hard, Amanda? I like to see dedication in my employees." Through the glass walls, I watched him approach her chair. Amanda tensed as he positioned himself directly behind her, close enough that his body was nearly touching hers. "You know, Amanda, you have real potential in this company. The kind of potential that could lead to promotions, salary increases, maybe even a transfer to our New York office." His hand moved to her shoulder. Amanda's entire body went rigid. Of course, advancement requires the right kind of relationship with management. Trust. Loyalty. Understanding. I pulled out my phone and started recording through the glass. Marcus's hand moved from Amanda's shoulder down her arm, his fingers trailing along her skin. Amanda remained frozen, her face pale with terror and disgust. Think about it, Amanda. Your future here could be very bright if you're willing to show appreciation for the opportunities I'm offering. When Marcus finally left the conference room, Amanda remained motionless for several minutes before slowly gathering her materials. I waited until Marcus returned to his office before approaching her. Amanda, are you okay? She looked at me with the same defeated expression I'd seen on Sarah's face. I can't afford to lose this job. I have student loans, rent, car payments. He knows that. What he did just now, that's sexual harassment. It's illegal. And who's going to believe me? He's the company's golden boy, and I'm just another expendable employee. Patricia Webb already told me once that I misunderstood his intentions when I reported what happened at the holiday party. What happened at the holiday party? Amanda's voice dropped to a whisper. He cornered me in the supply closet. Said he wanted to discuss my performance review. Then he pressed himself against me and put his hand under my skirt. When I pushed him away and told him to stop, he laughed and said I was reading too much into a friendly gesture. I felt sick. Amanda, you have to report this. I did. Patricia said it was his word against mine, and that alcohol sometimes makes people misinterpret innocent interactions. She suggested I avoid situations where I might send mixed signals. That evening, I researched everything I could about workplace harassment and employee rights. I discovered that 3 female employees had left Henderson and Associates in the past year, all from Marcus's department. Their LinkedIn profiles showed they had taken positions at companies with significantly lower pay and less prestige. The pattern was clear. Marcus Thompson was using his position to steal money from employees and sexually harass women, while HR protected him instead of the people he victimized. But I also discovered something that gave me hope. Colorado was a one-party consent state for audio recordings. As long as one person in a conversation consented to being recorded, it was completely legal. Marcus had no idea that every threat, every inappropriate comment, and every admission of wage theft was being permanently documented. I started recording every interaction, not just with Marcus but with Patricia Webb as well. If the corruption went as deep as I suspected, I needed evidence of everyone involved. The breakthrough came during my next confrontation with Marcus about my missing overtime pay. This time, I was prepared. Cheryl, we've discussed this before. Your timesheet reflects the hours you actually worked. That's not true, Marcus. I have documentation showing I worked 16 hours of overtime last week. Documentation? What kind of documentation? I pulled out my phone logs, email timestamps, and security badge records showing my extended hours. Marcus's expression shifted from annoyance to something more dangerous. You've been tracking me. I've been tracking my own work hours to ensure I'm paid correctly. Marcus leaned across his desk, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Let me make something very clear, Cheryl. Employees who don't trust their management don't last long at this company. I've made several careers disappear over the years, and I won't hesitate to make yours disappear too. My phone recorded every word. Are you threatening my job because I'm asking to be paid for hours I worked? I'm explaining reality. You can accept the way things work here, or you can find yourself unemployed and unemployable. I have connections throughout this industry, and one phone call from me can ensure you never work in marketing again. That's illegal retaliation. Marcus laughed. Prove it. It's your word against mine, and I've been building relationships in this business for 15 years. Who do you think they're going to believe? As I left his office that day, my phone had captured Marcus Thompson, admitting to wage theft, threatening retaliation, and boasting about destroying employees' careers. But I knew I needed more. If I was going to take down someone with his level of power and connections, I needed evidence so overwhelming that no one could ignore it. What I didn't know was that Marcus had noticed my changed behavior and was planning his own move against me. Marcus's suspicion of me became obvious during our next team meeting. His eyes followed my every movement, and I caught him studying my phone whenever I placed it on the conference table. The predator was realizing he might have prey that could fight back. The confrontation I'd been dreading came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Marcus called me into his office with a tone that made my skin crawl. "Cheryl, we need to have a serious conversation." I entered his office and immediately noticed he had moved his chair to block the door. My heart rate spiked, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Close the door and sit down." "I'd prefer to leave it open." I said, "Close the door." His voice carried the unmistakable tone of a threat. I reluctantly closed the door and took a seat, making sure my phone was positioned to record clearly. What happened next exceeded my worst expectations. "I've been watching you, Cheryl. Your behavior has changed significantly over the past few weeks. You're asking too many questions, documenting things that don't need to be documented, and I suspect you're trying to gather information to use against me." "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing something else entirely. And I think I know what it is." Marcus opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. "You've been recording our conversations, haven't you?" My blood went cold, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." "I can see it in how you position your phone. How you speak more clearly during our meetings. How you've started asking leading questions, designed to get me to say specific things. You're building a case against me." Marcus stood up and walked around his desk, positioning himself between me and the door. "I want you to hand me your phone right now. That's my personal property. You have no right to search it. I have every right to protect this company from corporate espionage. Give me the phone, Cheryl, or I'll call security and have you arrested for theft of company secrets." "You can't do that. Watch me." He picked up his desk phone and started dialing. "Security? This is Marcus Thompson. I need someone in my office immediately. I'm dealing with a potential theft situation." My mind raced. If security searched my phone, they'd find weeks of recordings, but they'd also see evidence of Marcus's crimes. The question was whether anyone would care about justice, or if they'd just protect the company's interests. "Wait," I said. "Don't call security." Marcus hung up the phone with a satisfied smile. "Smart choice. Now hand over the phone." "What if I told you that you're right? What if I have been recording you?" His smile faltered slightly. "Then you're in serious legal trouble. Recording someone without their consent is a felony in Colorado." "Actually, it's not." I pulled out the research I'd printed about one-party consent laws. Colorado allows recording as long as one person in the conversation consents. Since I consent to recording my own conversations, everything I've documented is completely legal. Marcus's face went through a series of color changes, from pale to red, to an alarming shade of purple. "You little witch, you think you're clever? I think I'm protecting myself and my coworkers from a criminal." The word criminal triggered something in Marcus that I'd never seen before. His professional mask didn't just slip away, it completely disintegrated. "Criminal? You want to see criminal? Let me tell you what criminal looks like." His voice rose to a near shout. "Criminal is what happens to employees who try to destroy their boss's careers. Criminal is what I'll do to your pathetic father's disability benefits when I make some phone calls to my contacts at Social Security." My blood turned to ice. "You're threatening my father? I'm promising you consequences. I have friends in government agencies, insurance companies, and medical facilities throughout Colorado. One word from me, and your father's benefits get audited. His doctors start questioning his diagnosis. His insurance claims get denied for mysterious reasons. I couldn't breathe. My father's disability benefits were the only thing keeping him alive, paying for medications that cost thousands of dollars per month. You can't do that, that's not legal." "Legal?" Marcus laughed maniacally. "I don't care about legal. I care about power. And I have more power than you can imagine. I've destroyed bigger threats than you, little girl. I made Sarah's previous boss fire her from her last job with one phone call. I had Amanda's credit rating mysteriously damaged when she first tried to report me. I can make you disappear from this industry so completely that you'll end up working fast food for the rest of your life." Every word was being recorded. Marcus Thompson was confessing to criminal behavior, admitting to retaliation, and threatening federal crimes involving disability fraud. I've been patient with you, Cheryl, because I thought you were just stupid. But you're not stupid, you're dangerous. And dangerous employees need to be eliminated. Eliminated, fired, blacklisted, and destroyed. I'm going to make sure everyone in Denver's business community knows that Cheryl Williams is a dishonest employee who records private conversations and tries to extort her supervisors. Your name will be poison. Marcus returned to his desk and pulled out a legal pad. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to delete every recording you've made. You're going to sign a statement admitting you violated company policy and committed industrial espionage. You're going to resign immediately and forfeit any severance or unemployment benefits. And you're going to sign a non-disclosure agreement promising never to discuss your time at this company. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning, you and your father will discover just how connected I really am. His benefits will be under investigation by noon. His doctors will start having concerns about his condition, and you'll be facing criminal charges for harassment and stalking. I stared at Marcus Thompson and realized I was looking at a sociopath. This wasn't just about stolen overtime or workplace harassment. This was about a man who had spent years building a network of corruption and using it to terrorize anyone who threatened his power. I need time to think about this. You have until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Come to the HR conference room with your phone, your signed confession, and your resignation letter. Patricia Webb will be there to witness your departure from this company. As I left his office, my legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk. But hidden in my pocket, my phone had captured every threat, every admission, and every criminal conspiracy Marcus had revealed. I had the evidence I needed to destroy him. The question was whether I had the courage to use it, knowing he had the power to destroy my father's life in retaliation. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to decide whether to fight or surrender. Finally, I pulled out my phone and made the most important call of my life. Colorado Department of Labor? I need to speak with someone about illegal retaliation and wage theft. The next morning felt like walking into a courtroom where the judge, jury, and prosecutor were all working for the other side. I arrived at Henderson and Associates 30 minutes early, my stomach churning with anxiety and determination. In my bag were copies of every recording, detailed documentation of every incident, and contact information for the Labor Department attorney who had agreed to assist me. But when I walked into the HR conference room at exactly 9 a.m., I realized Marcus had been planning his own strategy. Patricia Webb sat at the head of the conference table with a thick folder of documents spread before her. Marcus occupied the chair to her right, wearing his most professional suit and his most convincing expression of injured innocence. They looked like a team that had been preparing for this confrontation for weeks. "Sit down, Cheryl," Patricia said without looking up from her papers. "We have several serious matters to discuss." I took the chair across from them, acutely aware of my phone recording everything from my jacket pocket. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to make sure we're all clear on Colorado's laws regarding audio recording. This state has one-party consent, which means nothing," Patricia interrupted. "Henderson and Associates has a strict company policy prohibiting unauthorized recording of any employee conversations, meetings, or interactions. This policy is clearly stated in your employee handbook, which you signed when you were hired." She slid a highlighted copy of the employee handbook across the table. Sure enough, buried in Section 12 of the Workplace Conduct Policies was a prohibition on recording devices. "Company policy doesn't override state law," I said. "It absolutely does when it comes to employee discipline and termination. You violated a clearly stated company policy, which gives us grounds for immediate dismissal with cause." Marcus leaned forward with a concerned expression that would have won him an Oscar. "Cheryl, I'm disappointed that our relationship has deteriorated to this point. When I hired you 2 years ago, I had high hopes for your career development. The audacity was breathtaking. This man had threatened my father's disability benefits less than 24 hours ago, and now he was performing the role of a wounded mentor. Patricia, I think you need to hear what Marcus said to me yesterday." I think I need to hear what you recorded illegally yesterday, Patricia corrected. But first, let's address the more serious issue. She opened her folder and pulled out what appeared to be a legal document. Marcus has informed me that you've been engaging in what could be considered industrial espionage, recording confidential business conversations, documenting private management discussions, and potentially gathering information to harm the company's reputation. That's not what happened, isn't it? Marcus tells me you've been systematically recording him for weeks, asking leading questions designed to elicit information you could use against him. That sounds like entrapment to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Entrapment? He confessed to stealing overtime pay from employees. He admitted to sexually harassing female staff members. He threatened to destroy my father's disability benefits. Patricia and Marcus exchanged a look that made my heart sink. They weren't surprised by my accusations. They had prepared for them. Those are serious allegations, Cheryl. Do you have any proof beyond recordings that were made in violation of company policy? The recordings are proof. Illegally obtained recordings are inadmissible in any legal proceeding. More importantly, they're grounds for immediate termination and potential criminal prosecution. Marcus spoke up with perfectly calculated sadness. Cheryl, I'm concerned about your mental state. These accusations you're making are not only false, they're delusional. I've never stolen overtime pay from anyone. Our payroll system is automated and audited monthly. As for the other allegations, he shook his head sadly. I think you may be experiencing some kind of psychological break from stress. That's not true. Patricia nodded sympathetically. Workplace stress can manifest in many ways. Paranoid thinking, false memories, misinterpretation of normal interactions. We've seen it before. I realized I was trapped in a nightmare scenario. Marcus and Patricia had prepared a narrative that painted me as an unstable employee who had violated company policy and made false accusations against her supervisor. They were going to discredit everything I said by questioning my mental health. Here's what we're prepared to offer, Patricia continued. You can resign voluntarily with a neutral reference and full severance pay. We'll provide mental health resources to help you work through whatever issues are causing these delusions. In exchange, you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement and delete any recordings you've made. And if I refuse? Marcus answered with mock concern. Then we'll have to terminate you for cause, which means no severance, no unemployment benefits, and a disciplinary record that will follow you to any future employer. We'll also have to consider whether your behavior rises to the level of criminal stalking and harassment. The trap was perfect. They had used company policy to invalidate my evidence, painted my accusations as mental illness, and offered me a choice between voluntary resignation and complete destruction. I need to think about this. Of course, Patricia said gently. Take all the time you need. We'll wait right here while you make your decision. I sat in that conference room feeling completely defeated. Months of courage, weeks of careful documentation, and hours of terrifying recordings meant nothing if no one with power cared about the truth. But as I stared at Marcus Thompson's smug face, I remembered something the Labor Department attorney had mentioned during our phone call. She had asked whether Henderson and Associates had external legal counsel, and when I said yes, she had smiled in a way that seemed significant. Before I make my decision, I said, I'd like this conversation to be witnessed by the company's legal counsel. Patricia looked confused. That's not necessary for an employee resignation. It's necessary for what I'm considering. Marcus's confidence wavered slightly. What exactly are you considering? Filing complaints with the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the State Attorney General's Office for Criminal Retaliation and Wage Theft. Based on illegally recorded conversations? Based on documented patterns of behavior, witness testimony from other employees, and yes, legally recorded evidence of criminal threats. Patricia was shaking her head. Cheryl, you're making a serious mistake. These legal threats will only make your situation worse. Then let's have Jennifer Walsh join us to explain my legal options. Both Marcus and Patricia went completely still. The confident, controlling atmosphere in the room evaporated instantly. "How do you know about Jennifer Walsh?" Marcus asked quietly. "She's the company's external employment attorney, isn't she? If we're discussing potential legal issues, shouldn't the company's lawyer be present?" Patricia and Marcus looked at each other with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear? Panic? Guilt? "I'll see if Jennifer is available," Patricia said, her voice suddenly lacking its previous authority. As Patricia left the room to make the call, Marcus leaned across the table toward me. "You have no idea what you're messing with, Cheryl. Some fights you can't win. We'll see about that." What none of us knew was that Jennifer Walsh had been waiting for this exact moment for months. 20 minutes later, Jennifer Walsh entered the conference room like a force of nature. She was a woman in her early 40s with silver-streaked hair, sharp eyes behind designer glasses, and the unmistakable bearing of someone who had spent decades winning battles that others thought were unwinnable. "Good morning, everyone. I understand we have a complex employment situation to discuss." Patricia had returned with her, but her previous confidence was completely gone. She looked like someone who had just realized she was standing in quicksand. "Jennifer, this is just a routine resignation meeting. Cheryl has decided to leave the company." Jennifer smiled politely and pulled out a digital recorder, placing it prominently on the conference table. "I hope no one objects to recording this conversation. Given the sensitive nature of employment disputes, I like to have complete documentation." Marcus started to object, but Jennifer cut him off smoothly. "Marcus, before we proceed, I need to inform you that this meeting is being conducted under attorney-client privilege with Henderson and Associates. Everything said here will be held in strict confidence unless it pertains to illegal activity." She opened her briefcase and pulled out several thick folders. "Now, Cheryl, I understand you've made some serious allegations about workplace misconduct. Would you like to share your concerns with me?" I looked around the room, suddenly feeling like the balance of power had shifted in a way I didn't fully understand. "I've documented extensive evidence of wage theft, sexual harassment, and criminal retaliation by Marcus Thompson. I have recordings of him admitting to these crimes and threatening to destroy my father's disability benefits." Jennifer nodded calmly. "I see. And Marcus, Patricia, how do you respond to these allegations?" Patricia jumped in quickly. "The recordings were made in violation of company policy. They're inadmissible and grounds for termination." "Actually," Jennifer said, consulting her notes, "that's not quite accurate. While company policy may prohibit recording, it doesn't invalidate evidence of criminal behavior. In fact, Colorado courts have consistently ruled that one-party consent recordings are admissible in cases involving illegal retaliation and harassment." Marcus's face was growing pale. "Jennifer, I think there's been some misunderstanding here." "Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all." Jennifer opened one of her folders. "Marcus, are you familiar with the anonymous complaints that have been filed with the company's board of directors over the past 6 months?" The color drained completely from Marcus's face. "What complaints?" "Allegations of financial impropriety, sexual harassment, and abuse of power. The board retained my services to conduct a discreet investigation into these matters." She turned to Patricia. "Patricia, are you aware that your handling of harassment complaints has been under review by our insurance carrier? They're concerned about the company's liability exposure due to what appears to be a pattern of inadequate responses to serious allegations." Patricia looked like she was going to be sick. "I wasn't aware of any investigation." "Of course you weren't. These types of investigations are conducted confidentially to protect the integrity of the process." Jennifer turned back to Marcus. "I've been trying to gather sufficient evidence to either substantiate or disprove these allegations. Unfortunately, most victims of workplace harassment are reluctant to come forward due to fear of retaliation." She looked directly at me. "Which is why Cheryl's recordings could be extremely valuable to this investigation." Marcus found his voice. "This is a setup. You can't use an employee to entrap me." Jennifer laughed softly. "Marcus, no one entrapped you. If you committed crimes and made threats, That's entirely your responsibility. Cheryl was protecting herself from illegal retaliation, which is her absolute right under both state and federal law. She pulled out another document. What's particularly interesting is that the board's investigation has uncovered some fascinating discrepancies in the company's payroll records. It appears that overtime payments have been systematically reduced across multiple departments, with the saved money being redirected to executive bonuses. Marcus was now visibly sweating. I don't know anything about that. Of course you do. You authorized most of the timesheet modifications. Jennifer slid a spreadsheet across the table. We have documentation going back 18 months showing a pattern of wage theft, totaling over $200,000. Patricia tried to regain control of the situation. Even if there were payroll errors, that's not criminal. It's an accounting issue that can be resolved internally. Wage theft is absolutely criminal under Colorado law, Jennifer replied. But that's not the most serious issue we're facing. She opened her final folder. The Department of Labor received an anonymous tip yesterday about potential violations of federal labor laws at Henderson and Associates. They've requested all payroll records, employee complaint files, and disciplinary documentation for the past 3 years. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is harassment. You're using company resources to conduct a personal vendetta against me. Actually, I'm using company resources to protect the company from massive legal liability. The board of directors is very concerned about potential lawsuits, criminal charges, and federal investigations that could destroy Henderson and Associates' reputation. Jennifer turned to me with an expression that was both professional and kind. Cheryl, would you be willing to share your recordings with me? I can guarantee they'll be used only to protect the company and its employees from further illegal behavior. I looked at Marcus and Patricia, both of whom appeared to be in various stages of panic, then back at Jennifer Walsh. Yes, I have everything documented. Excellent. Jennifer made a note in her file. Marcus, Patricia, I think we need to have a much longer conversation about your future with this company. But first, I'd like to hear exactly what threats were made against Cheryl and her family. Marcus's professional mask finally cracked completely. You can't do this to me. I've given 15 years to this company. My uncle founded this business. Your step-uncle, Jennifer corrected. And he's the one who authorized this investigation after receiving multiple complaints about your behavior. The room fell completely silent as the implications of Jennifer's words sank in. Robert Henderson, the company founder, wasn't protecting Marcus. He was investigating him. Marcus looked around the room like a trapped animal, finally realizing that his network of power and protection had abandoned him. I want to call my lawyer, he said quietly. That's probably a good idea, Jennifer replied. Because after we listen to Cheryl's recordings, you're going to need one. Jennifer Walsh connected her laptop to the conference room's audio system and looked around the table with the calm professionalism of someone who had orchestrated this exact scenario many times before. Before we begin, I need to make something clear to everyone in this room. This meeting is being conducted under the authority of Henderson and Associates Board of Directors. Everything we're about to hear will be documented and potentially shared with law enforcement agencies. Marcus was frantically typing on his phone, presumably trying to reach his attorney. Patricia sat frozen in her chair, staring at the table like she was trying to disappear. Marcus, please put your phone away. You'll have time to contact your attorney after this meeting concludes. I'm not saying another word until my lawyer is present. That's your right. However, I should mention that remaining silent, while evidence of criminal behavior is presented, doesn't actually protect you legally. In fact, it often makes things worse. Jennifer turned to me. Cheryl, I'd like to start with your most recent recording. The conversation from yesterday afternoon. I pulled out my phone with hands that were finally steady. After weeks of feeling powerless and afraid, I was about to watch Marcus Thompson face the consequences of his own words. The first sound that filled the conference room was Marcus's voice demanding that I close his office door. As the recording continued, I watched his face transform from defiant confidence to growing horror as he heard himself confessing to wage theft, admitting to harassment, and threatening federal crimes. When the recording reached the part where Marcus threatened my father's disability benefits, Patricia actually gasped out loud. Jesus, Marcus, what were you thinking? I was bluffing, Marcus said desperately. I was just trying to scare her. I don't actually have connections at Social Security. Jennifer paused the recording. Marcus, threatening to interfere with someone's federal benefits is a felony under multiple statutes. The fact that you may not have the ability to carry out the threat doesn't change the criminal nature of making it. She resumed the recording, and we all listened to Marcus boasting about destroying other employees' careers, admitting to damaging Amanda's credit rating, and promising to make me disappear from the industry. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Patricia, Jennifer said calmly, I'd like to hear your response to what we just heard. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. I had no idea he was making those kinds of threats. But you were aware of the harassment complaints against him? Yes. But I thought they were misunderstandings. Marcus explained that the women were misinterpreting normal workplace interactions. Jennifer pulled out another file. Let me read you some excerpts from the complaints we've received. Sarah Martinez reported that Marcus told her she should wear more revealing clothing if she wanted to advance in the company. Amanda Foster documented multiple instances of inappropriate touching and sexual propositions. 3 former female employees reported similar patterns before they left the company. She looked directly at Patricia. As HR director, you dismissed all of these complaints without conducting proper investigations. In some cases, you actually advised the women to change their behavior to avoid sending mixed signals. Patricia was crying now. I was trying to protect the company from lawsuits. I thought if I could resolve the situations quietly. You were protecting the company from lawsuits by enabling continued harassment? Jennifer's voice carried a sharp edge for the first time. Patricia, your handling of these complaints has exposed Henderson and Associates to massive legal liability. Marcus suddenly found his voice again. This is all hearsay and speculation. You can't prove any of this. Jennifer smiled coldly. Actually, Marcus, I can prove all of it. She pressed a button on her laptop, and the conference room door opened. 2 people entered who made Marcus's face go completely white. The first was Amanda Foster, carrying a folder thick with documentation. The second was a man in a dark suit, who looked like law enforcement. Marcus Thompson. I'm Special Agent David Rodriguez, with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Unit. We've been investigating financial irregularities at Henderson and Associates based on complaints filed with multiple federal agencies. Marcus tried to stand up, but Agent Rodriguez gestured for him to remain seated. Mr. Thompson, we've been monitoring this meeting with the full cooperation of the company's legal counsel. Everything you've said here has been recorded and will be used in our investigation. You can't do that. This was a private company meeting. Jennifer spoke up. Actually, Marcus, when the FBI informed us that you were under investigation for federal crimes, we were legally obligated to cooperate. This meeting was conducted with their full knowledge and approval. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a digital recorder and placed it next to Jennifer's. Mr. Thompson, in addition to the evidence we've just heard, Miss Foster has provided us with extensive documentation of sexual harassment, financial retaliation, and abuse of power. Amanda finally spoke, her voice strong and clear. I've been working with the FBI for 2 months, documenting every interaction with Marcus. When other employees started coming forward, we realized this was a much larger criminal conspiracy than anyone imagined. Marcus looked around the room like a cornered animal. This is entrapment. You set me up. No one set you up, Agent Rodriguez replied. You committed crimes, you made threats, and you confessed to illegal behavior. Multiple times. With multiple witnesses. Jennifer opened her final folder. Marcus, the evidence against you includes wage theft affecting 47 employees, sexual harassment of at least 12 women, criminal retaliation, and federal crimes involving threats against disability benefits. The total financial damage exceeds $300,000. I want my lawyer. Your lawyer is welcome to meet you at the federal building. Marcus Thompson. You're under arrest for violations of federal labor law, criminal retaliation, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. As Agent Rodriguez read Marcus his rights, Patricia collapsed completely. I didn't know it was this serious. I thought I was protecting the company. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. Patricia, you'll also be facing charges related to your role in covering up these crimes. However, your cooperation with this investigation will be taken into consideration. As federal agents led Marcus out of the conference room in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me one final time. The arrogance and cruelty were gone, replaced by the pathetic desperation of a man who had finally been held accountable for his actions. Cheryl? Agent Rodriguez said. Your courage in documenting these crimes has prevented dozens of other employees from being victimized. The FBI will be recommending you for a substantial reward under the Federal Whistleblower Protection Program. I sat in that conference room, watching the man who had terrorized me and my coworkers being led away in handcuffs, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: relief. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Walsh & Associates Employment Law, looking out at the Denver skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was spectacular, but it wasn't nearly as beautiful as the sense of purpose that filled my chest every morning when I came to work. Marcus Thompson had pled guilty to 17 federal charges and received a sentence of 5 years in federal prison, along with restitution orders totaling over $400,000. Patricia Webb lost her professional certifications and was serving 2 years of probation for her role in covering up the crimes. But the real victory wasn't in their punishments. It was in what happened to the people they had hurt. Sarah Martinez received a promotion to Senior Marketing Director at Henderson & Associates, along with back pay and a formal apology from the board of directors. Amanda Foster had been offered the HR Director position, which she accepted after the company implemented comprehensive new policies protecting employee rights. The other 46 employees who had been victims of wage theft received full restitution plus interest and damages. 3 women who had left the company due to Marcus's harassment were offered positions at higher salaries than they'd been making at their new jobs. As for me, Jennifer Walsh had offered me something I never expected: a chance to help other people in situations like mine. Cheryl, Jennifer called from her office. Your 2 o'clock appointment is here. I walked into the reception area to meet with Maria Santos, a 26-year-old woman whose story sounded heartbreakingly familiar. She worked for a construction company where her supervisor had been stealing overtime pay and making increasingly aggressive sexual advances. I'm scared to report him, Maria told me as we sat in my office. He says he has connections that will get me deported if I cause trouble. Maria, let me tell you something important. Criminals like your boss rely on fear to control their victims. But once you understand your rights and gather proper evidence, their power disappears. I pulled out the same legal documents that had saved my life 6 months earlier. Colorado is a one-party consent state for audio recording. Every threat he makes, every illegal demand, every inappropriate comment can be documented and used against him. Over the next 2 hours, I walked Maria through the same process that had brought down Marcus Thompson. We discussed recording techniques, legal protections, and the network of agencies that existed to help workers like us. The most important thing to remember, I told her, is that you're not alone. There are people who will fight for you, lawyers who will represent you, and laws that will protect you. But first, you have to find the courage to protect yourself. As Maria left my office with a plan and hope in her eyes, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The girl who had been terrified to confront her boss about stolen overtime had become a woman who helped others find their voices against workplace predators. My father's medical bills were no longer a source of constant anxiety. The FBI whistleblower reward had been substantial enough to cover his treatments for years, and my new salary at Walsh & Associates provided security I'd never imagined possible. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the knowledge that Marcus Thompson would never hurt another employee again. What mattered was that companies throughout Colorado had updated their policies after hearing about our case. What mattered was that other victims of workplace harassment now knew they had options and allies. Jennifer knocked on my door as I was finishing my case notes for the day. "How did it go with Maria?" "She's ready to fight back. I think we're going to be very busy over the next few months." Jennifer smiled. "Good. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear when I hired you." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the phone call I'd made 6 months earlier from the parking lot of Henderson and Associates. I had been terrified, desperate, and convinced that I was about to lose everything. Instead, I had found everything I never knew I was looking for. My father was waiting for me in the kitchen when I got home, as he had every evening for the past 28 years. "How was work today, sweetheart?" For the first time in my life, I had an answer that made me proud. "Dad, I helped someone find the courage to stand up for herself today. I think she's going to be just fine." He smiled with those wise eyes that had guided me through every important decision of my life. "That's my girl. I always knew you were going to change the world." As I sat with my father that evening, helping him with his medications and listening to his stories about his day, I realized that Marcus Thompson had been wrong about almost everything. He had believed that power came from fear, control, and the ability to destroy other people's lives. But real power came from courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Real power came from turning your pain into purpose and your fear into fuel for fighting injustice. Marcus Thompson was in federal prison, where he would spend the next 5 years learning that actions have consequences. Patricia Webb was rebuilding her life, hopefully with a better understanding of right and wrong. And I was exactly where I belonged, using my experience to help other people reclaim their power and their dignity. The recordings that had once represented my darkest moments had become the foundation for the most meaningful work of my life. Every day, I had the privilege of helping people transform their fear into courage and their silence into strength. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about healing, growth, and the promise that tomorrow could be better than today for everyone brave enough to demand it. Have you ever found yourself in a workplace situation where you knew something was wrong but felt powerless to speak up? What gave you the courage to take action? Or what held you back from taking that first step? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help it reach others who might be facing similar challenges. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing that they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept that things will never change. Your voice matters, your courage counts, and there are always people ready to stand with you when you're ready to stand up for yourself. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right. And never underestimate the power of one person's determination to make a difference.